Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I hope you like our new electro-funk intro music. Thanks to Emil from my team who put it together. While we are warming up the channel, letting everybody join, me and my guests are dancing in the background. This music is hopefully as nice as it appears to me. And of course, just a few words before we start. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, but also you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter because we are streaming simultaneously to every possible channel. Join our Discord community that is there for us to have a conversation around the themes that these episodes cover. And of course, if you find this content as well as every other channel that I create and curate valuable, feel free to subscribe and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/David Orban. So today we are going to talk about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in a very, very unorthodox approach because both 1517 Fund and my friend Danielle, who's a general partner there, have fairly contrarian ways of thinking about why and how people should be supported in the startup ecosystem, contrarian to a lot of assumed wisdom. And of course, it will be wonderful to have a conversation with her about this, as well as the projects that she's excited about. And so let's start by welcoming Danielle. There you go.
Hey.
Wonderful to see you.
Yeah, wonderful to be here, David. And I have to say, your intro music made me want to start doing a Charleston. I used to be a swing dancer and a Lindy Hopper, and I was like, this is great. I was like, I'm ready.
So I am so happy to hear that. Yes, yes. I remember seeing the movie The Great Gatsby, and that was the entire soundtrack was electro funk, and that is electro swing maybe. That is where I learned to like this style first. So what I like to do when we are together with guests all over the world is to also show them and show our viewers where we are in the world, right? So I am speaking to you from Bergamo, Italy, and you are, if I am not mistaken, in San Francisco. And
I'm right outside San Francisco in Oakland, technically, but I'm right across the bridge.
So I already programmed Google Earth to
go for San Francisco.
Fly to San Francisco, and then we will show Oakland is not too far across the bay.
Yep, here we are.
That is San Francisco, beautiful California. And if you zoom out a little bit, there is Oakland.
I can see my house.
Oh, okay. Well, if you look out from the window, you will see my finger pointing at you right now. So how are you COVIDing? How are you coping with the lockdown and everything?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I think in the US, the Bay Area was one of the first, if not the first, to go into a sheltering in place mode. And we are still in it. It's each county in California is sort of figuring out what's going to be best for them. But overall, I personally am doing well through it. I've been very lucky in that my family, for those who a couple of them potentially had or did have COVID, got through it fine. Working from home is something that I'm very accustomed to, that we're very accustomed to with 1517. Investing online and through Zoom is very normal for us. we've actually been able to do a lot of outreach to our community, and we're doing something called 1517 at home now, where on Friday nights we're having a talk about any matter of different subjects, and that's been great. We've been able to reach somewhere between 150 and 200 people per Friday night, one of those. So that's great, because when we're doing in-person events, it's geographically locked. And so this has been really nice for us to outreach to more of our community. But yeah, no, we are doing well through this. We're a venture capital fund, and so our companies are going through the ups and downs of what it means to pivot right now through COVID. Some of our companies are doing very, very well. Actually, one of our companies, Loom, they're an asynchronous video tool. So it takes a video of your face and your screen at the same time. I actually use it a lot for pitch deck feedback, but designers and engineers use it. Now, since COVID, teachers are using it. There's a teacher in Berkeley who's teaching a class of 2,500 students, and Loom really considers themselves a public service at this point. They just announced their latest round with Sequoia and Co2. So we're really excited for their progress and where they're going to go in the future. And we have another company actually called Hamama that you might want to pull up. They're kind of like the victory garden of the kitchen. They are helping people to grow their own food just indoors. So you don't need a plot of land. You don't need a lot of light. I've been a user for 2 years and an investor in the company for a little over a year. They are really, really fantastic with what they do. I actually wish I have my hamamas downstairs. I could run down and grab one, but I think we're probably out of time for that. But yeah, they're a really fun company too, and they're doing great, helping people and supporting what they're doing right now. Yeah, that's Hamama right there, and you'll see if you scroll.
Yeah, I love it. So in-house gardens to grow microgreens.
Yeah, no dirt. It's so easy. You just add water. They've innovated on that thing that they just put in the tray. That's called a seed quilt. That's their novel piece of technology, and you put water in it, and that's it. And in 10 days, you have fresh greens. I have some new wasabi greens coming up right now. I've never had those ones before, so I'm excited about it. If anyone's interested in this, you can use code 1517 VIP to get a 15% discount. But we love this company. I love working with the founders, and they're really, they're an essential service right now. So it's been great to see our companies be able to step up to the plate and be able to help during a time when just so much is needed.
Let me put the code on the screen. So there you go.
Yeah, it might have to be.
You can get Hamama.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It might have to be capital VIP. I'm not entirely sure if it's case sensitive. But yeah, if people want to check it out, yeah, they're. I have 4 of them, so I'm big into growing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you know if they ship all over the US or all over the world?
Right now, the US. We're hoping for global expansion soon.
All right.
I do know they have customers who buy them from them and then ship them globally. The shipping is the hard part with this type of product. They're even thinking about in the future, where do they set up other warehouses, and so that shipping is easier and more affordable. It's always interesting to learn about what the struggles of different companies are, because what you assume the struggle might be, it might be something totally different. And Hamama for us is, I think it's our very first direct-to-consumer company. We don't do a lot in consumer typically, so we're learning a lot alongside the team about what it takes to put out product, what it takes to ship, customer engagement in this type of world. Very interesting stuff.
So you are an important representative of a minority, at least today, which is a female VC, a female investor.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey of how did you get where you are, and whether it can be an inspiration for other people to follow, other girls, other women to follow your path?
Yeah, absolutely. So like many people's paths, it's twisty and turny, and in some places doesn't make any sense. I always tell people, if someone had said to me 10 years ago, are you going to be in venture capital or in VC? First of all, I would have said, what's VC? I didn't even know the acronym. And So I didn't foresee myself in finance. I didn't see myself working in startups, even as far back as 10 years ago in particular. But I have worked a lot in terms of working with human potential for a long time. At one point in my very early career, I was a psychometrician, which means that I was doing intelligence testing and sort of character testing and behavioral testing, actually with individuals. At a later point, I was a private tutor working with students. At a later point after that, I started a charter school where we served young people who had kind of a different philosophy. One of the philosophical underpinnings that I have is that choice is very important for human beings, and that extends down into children. And so our charter school is based on homeschooling principles and child-led learning and directedness. From there, I made this interesting leap where I grew up in Boston. I moved to San Diego. That's where I ended up starting my charter school. And then I moved up to the Bay Area, and I didn't really know what I was going to do in the Bay. I was doing a staycation. I didn't know if my skill sets of being an operator would be valuable. Starting a charter school there are a lot of things that are analogous to starting a startup. You need to find funding. You need to build a team. It's a lot of the same type of journey, but I just wasn't sure if it would really be valued up here. I thought, oh, I'm not a coder. I don't have a tech background. How am I gonna fit in here essentially? And I got a phone call one day from someone who worked at the Teal Foundation, and I had seen that the Teal Fellowship had launched 10 years ago. And so Peter Thiel is the founder of the Teal Fellowship and the main donor of the Teal Foundation. And he started a program to give young people $100,000 to work on a project or startup or nonprofit of their choosing outside of school. So the idea was, instead of having a young person spend $100,000 on their education, what would happen if you gave them $100,000 to work on something over a 2-year period? Would they be able to accelerate their career and their life path?
And that is where we originally met, because I was and maybe I'm still am a mentor at the TL Fellowship. It is funny because I don't have a lot of contact with the fellowship team, but all the candidates and some of the applicants and some of the fellows are in touch directly. And since they are by definition very self-directed people, they just seek out potential mentors, right? So it is funny that I receive these questions of how to apply, what they can get out of it, and I have kept in touch with a large number of the fellows. Actually, we had on the show. Let me pull it up. Just recently, one from the first cohort. Guess who?
From the first cohort. Oh, did you have Laura Deming on?
Let me show you.
Not Laura. Like, who'd you have?
Dale.
Yeah.
Dale
Dale Stevens. Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah, with Uncollege and all he's done in the education world, and now he's working as a coach. Yeah. No, one of the things that we always said about the Teal Fellowship was that it was a 2-year program, but a 10-year timeline. So it's one of these things where people would often compare the program to college at the beginning and say, oh, well, what do these people have to show for what they're doing? And, for some of them, it was the very early days of what they were starting with, a business or a nonprofit or a project or research. But now that we're out 10 years later, it'll be 10 years in September, we've really been able to see a lot of the impact that they've had from taking this sort of creative path and doing something different for themselves. So some of our fellows are like Laura Deming, who has started 2 venture capital funds that work in longevity. Dale Stevens has done tremendous work in ed tech. We have Vitalik Buterin, who launched Ethereum during the Teal Fellowship. Dylan Field, who started Figma. They were just backed by Andreessen. That started during, that was launched during the fellowship. And then we have Ritesh with Oyo Rooms, which is the second largest hotel chain in the world right now. And so, during those first 2 years, as most investors know, the first 2 years of a company are, kind of like the seed of an idea to just barely having a team assembled. Maybe you have 10 or 15 people in the first couple of years. But I've been really blessed and astounded to get to work with some amazing people and be part of that journey. And it was really working with the fellowship. And one of my life lessons working with the fellowship was that I had seen the program launch on social and just in the news, but I assumed because it was out in the news that it was fully fleshed out and they had a whole staff. And so I thought, oh, well, I'm not, I knew people over there, but I wasn't going to reach out because, they must have everything they need. But that wasn't the case. And so someone came to me at the beginning of the program and said, hey, your background working in alternative education, philosophically, you're in line with what we're doing. We'd love for you to come over here and run the program. And so I said, oh, wow, why not? So I did that staycation in the Bay Area. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I ended up working for Peter and the Thiel Foundation for 5 years. And it was from seeing the extraordinary results of the young people we were working with, and also that there was a gap in access to capital for young people. When we would try to introduce fellows to people in venture, it was really hard to find a right fit. And so in year 5, which was in 2015, myself and my colleague Michael Gibson, we went to Peter and we were proposing just leaving the foundation to start a venture capital fund. We were kind of calling it a fellowship 2.0. So instead of working with just the individuals, we would work with their companies. So Peter loved the idea. Not only did he give us his blessing to leave the foundation, but he also committed as an anchor LP to our fund to help us get started. We had 30 LPs in our first fund, and I call them our true believers because, we didn't have a track record at that time. We were learning. So
Kevin calls them true fans, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, they are our true fans. It is so true. And so we've gotten to work with some really amazing people. We've worked on 1517 now for 5 years, and it has been an extraordinary journey. I mean, we went from really understanding how to discover talent and work with people who are outside the norm to being able to evaluate companies, to being able to help them to get more funding, to make hires, all the ups and downs of startup life. And so now we work with a large portfolio of about 50 companies. And that'll be growing more and more over the years.
And you list also grants. So yes. At the beginning, since we are talking about at least at the beginning, the deal flow was mostly the fellowship recipients, right? So we are talking about very young people who could be as young as 18, 19. Or 20 or 22, but by definition, none older than 25.
So it's not about age for us, it's about narrative. And so the narrative for us is that the majority of our founders, I'd say 85 to 90% of our founders don't have an undergrad degree. So some of our founders are in their 30s. I call them my OG dropouts. They were doing it before it was cool. But yes, the majority of our founders do tend to be somewhere around 20 to 25 years old. This might be the first sort of like real startup they've done. Maybe they've built apps before. Maybe they've had other sort of projects they've done. But yeah, this is a big first moment for them.
So the concept of the grant really is, listen, we both know you don't know what you are doing. Why don't you try?
Yeah.
And rather than complicating our lives, you just dedicate yourself to it, and then you come back, and then we can start talking.
Yeah, so it's sort of that. It's also one of the things that we just saw was that a small amount of money could really help someone to go much further than we thought. With the fellowship, we had assumed that someone would need a large amount of money to be able to kick something off. And during the fellowship, we actually piloted giving 1K grants to people.
That's amazing. What is the smallest grant that you gave? In my mind, really, and we are, you and I obviously are not alone in this. Even giving somebody the money to buy themselves a smartphone.
Yep. Oh, huge.
Can
Yeah.
change incredibly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so what we've seen is that when, especially, now we're doing it virtually, but typically if we're at office hours on a campus or we're at a hackathon, a young person would walk up to us and say, hey, I want to learn more about 1517. We tell them about us. And I say, what are you working on? What's interesting in your dorm room? And they'd say, oh, I'm trying to hack together this or that or the other thing. And you could tell they were like really passionate about it, or, that they had some of the skill they would need to move forward. And oftentimes I would ask them, I call it a fairy godmother moment. I'd say, what would you do with $1,000? And they tell me, oh, I'd buy an Arduino, I'd buy this type of equipment, I'd use it for AWS credits, and then I tell them I can give them those, and then what else do they want to spend the money on? And many times we've said to students when they've come up, okay, great, I'm going to give you $1,000. Like, you have sort of an inkling of what you would do. They often have characteristics that we're looking for in founders and in people who were what we were evaluating in the Teal Fellowship, like insatiable curiosity, passion, drive, interest. And for us, $1,000 is a really easy way to start working with someone, and sort of, we call it a nudge grant, because it nudges them into the frame of mind of, what, maybe I should start working on this now. So we've had a lot of young people who've come to us and said, wow, you all believed in me first, and that belief made me believe in myself to do this.
That's right. They feel the pressure to step up to the plate.
Yep.
And start delivering, start, as you say, believing in themselves.
Yeah. Well, because everybody else is telling them they should just focus on their studies, and why would you do something else? And what's interesting is we'll forever think of our grants as a goodwill and rapport builder with the maker community. But what's been interesting is that 20% of our Fund 1 companies started as grantees with us. So we didn't expect it to be like in venture, you'd call this a deal flow generator. We never thought of it like that. We'll never think of it like that. But what's been interesting is how fast people have come back around. In fact, we even had a young French entrepreneur who came back to us. She had taken the grant, leveraged it so hard that she was raising more money than we could even come in for. She was so far off to the races, it was outside our scope at that point. And I was like, I'm glad the grant helped. Like, have fun storming the castle, building your company. Like, we'll introduce you to other investors who can do a larger check than we can. So we've seen some really, really amazing outcomes of just that small check.
And what about geographical distribution? Another dogma of traditional VC in the Bay Area used to be, I'm in Sand Hill Road. Yeah. I want to hop in my Mercedes and reach you in not more than 20 minutes. If you are farther out.
Yeah, it's terrible. I have a funny story. One of our founders is in New York, and his office is in Brooklyn, and they're a hard tech company. And so they have right there. I'm not going to list who they are because I'm going to say something about their board. But the funny part is that they had their first board meeting, and the board said, oh, hey, we don't want to go to Brooklyn. Will you come over here to Manhattan instead? And we were the first investors to ever go visit their actual office, and they raised a lot of money. And I was like, how do people make these investments and don't even go visit or won't be willing to cross a bridge for a board meeting? So
hardcore New Yorkers pretend they have to pick up their passport to go to the outside boroughs. It's
so true. It's so true. No, so one of the things, this sort of goes back to some of my old history, but when I was a private tutor, I would learn so much going to somebody's home. When the door opened and I could see, like, okay, this house is chaotic, or this house is really clean, or this is the environment this student is in, that was really helpful for me in teaching them. And I feel the same way about startups. When I go to their environment, I get to see where they are. I get to see growth over time. Like one of our startups, Loom, that we talked about earlier, on the third pitch they did to us, we met them at their apartment in San Mateo. And it was like this kind of dark San Mateo apartment, not very much light coming in. And now they have this beautiful office in San Francisco. And of course, they're working remote a lot right now. So I love to see the change over time of like, hey, here's where it started. And so we visit companies a lot. We do lots of Zoom meetings. We don't expect people to just come to us or be in the Bay. We invest all over North America. And our grants we've sometimes done internationally, although one of the things we think about with our grants is that there needs to be a path forward. What we don't want the grant to be is a dead in the water moment where someone gets somewhere, but then they can't take it further because there's not an ecosystem to support them.
Okay, so what about the next step? Because the concept of decentralized and distributed teams is now becoming something that is not only in the exotic world of open source software development and hyper geeks, but it is becoming quite accepted. And that means that the legal vehicle that you need in order to be able to invest, established as a Delaware C Corp, which is the best, is not necessarily tied to the people living anywhere specifically.
No, I've seen that a lot. I've seen people who are starting companies that are more international and internationally based who have a Delaware C Corp. Because this is the framework that is legally most appetizing. And so that does help out a lot. For us, though, one of the things we think about in terms of investing in general is, do we have a really good handle on the economics of the place, of the problem itself, and so on? And so for us as a team of 4 people, it gets a little bit shaky of, I'm not going to pretend to understand what happens in Malaysia. Like, I don't have that expertise or understanding. At some point, we would love to expand and be more global, although that's where our investors come in. We have investors who are from Hong Kong, Singapore, Guatemala, Germany, Estonia, all over. And it's been so lovely to work with them. And so we actually will sometimes, a young person will write into our contact form. And actually this happened the other day. Someone wrote in and they're in Guatemala. And we said to our investor in Guatemala, hey, Fernando, would you want to talk to this person? And he said, yes. And they're going to go chat. So we love making this.
So just to make sure that the people listening understand, because the structure of venture capital investing is not super obvious to everybody. One important difference between angel investing and venture capital investing is that a professional investor in a venture capital firm has investors of their own. So you are deploying money that has been entrusted to you so that you can multiply it. Basically,
exactly right.
You are a startup selling a product. Your product is the money. And you are receiving payment for your product in equity, right?
Exactly.
So you are talking about the people who gave money to your fund, and those are who are, as you said, in many parts of the world. And traditionally, once again, because we are deconstructing a little bit the VC structure as it is and contrasting it with 15, 17, traditionally, investors in VC funds used to be pension funds and university endowments and trusts and family offices or multifamily offices, etc. And that is where, as you said at the beginning, you didn't necessarily fit because you are not a Harvard MBA.
I don't want to be though.
And you don't want to be, right?
What it actually comes down to is fund size. So there's a category of fund now called like the micro fund or the nano fund, and that tends to be like a micro fund tends to be under $100 million. And so when you're talking about endowments and hedge funds and things like that, like the smallest check they want to write is $10 million, if not $50 million. But for example, our first fund was only $20 million. And so we went out to family offices and individuals and we got $500K checks and $1 million checks. And so, we brought that whole group together, and then we're beholden to invest their money. That's how that works.
As you become successful, and the measure of success for a venture capital fund is the ROI, the return on your funds itself, the internal rate of return, the IRR, more specifically, and basically your investors compare whether taking it into account all the risk, they would have had a better option just keeping their money in bonds or whatever unexciting stuff. And hopefully it will turn out that the bet paid off. You have been able to generate an IRR that beats the bond market, and then you go and say, okay, let's do it again. And they will say, yeah, we had fun, let's do it again. And then typically the second vehicle is larger and then larger and then larger. Have you started thinking about how not to forget your roots and how not to end up, because one of the syndromes of this growth-oriented mindset is to then say, listen, I'd love to be part of your round. Unfortunately, we cannot cut a check that is less than $1 million. And you only need $500,000. So we cannot play. So what are you planning to do in order to preserve your legacy as you build your trajectory?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good question, because we've seen a lot of funds that started as seed funds or early stage funds, and now they do Series A plus or Series B plus, or they look more like a hedge fund at this point. And so for us, first on that IRR number, we got our audit back a few weeks ago, so I can very proudly report that our IRR is at 20%. And that number, for those who don't know, puts us in the top quartile of funds. So that means our first fund is performing very, very well.
Congratulations, fantastic.
It's one of these things where it's really nice to have that number, because for as a fund manager how your portfolio is doing, but to be able to report it in a succinct way is very hard, because I talk to my founders all the time and I can tell my investors they're doing really great, but it takes a certain amount of time for markups to come, no matter how great the company is doing. And internally, we know that. And we're very conservative with our markups, where we only mark them up when the next price round occurs. And so we're very happy to be a top quartile fund now. We do think a lot about fund composition, because we don't want to outgrow our current rank. We want to always be a pre-seed fund. And so that means, there's always this pressure to raise more money, because it means you can hire more people. It means you can do more with your fund. But that said, we are really dedicated, and our whole mission is around being that first check in to a student or a young person's company. We don't want to become a Series A fund that anyone can just go to for funding. We really want to be that first supporter in the door. And so I think for our funds, we have our second fund open right now. And in the future, like when we have fund 3, I think it would be really rare that we would ever be over something like an $80 million fund. We have some of our founders who eventually would love to come work for us in the future and things like that. And so and we've grown the team already. We have Nick and Zach, who are principals, who are grooming into partner roles as well. And so we do want to grow the firm across, but we want to stay in our sweet spot. What we know is how to write that first check. We know how to get someone from that sort of idea and pilots into product market fit, and grow with them at that stage.
What is because what we are doing is we are looking at various parameters: check size, geography, stage of company, and another important parameter that startup founders need to understand is the decision process and the timeline and the duration of the decision process. So how do you characterize that in the way that your fund makes investment decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you might have it already pulled up, but we have a whole post on this. It's called the Anti-Pitch Playbook. And it's something that we put out. It's a 30-minute read that I'd urge anyone to read before they pitch us. But there's a few things that we look for in a pitch. One is actually relationship over time. And so that's where our grants come in. That's where starting to mentor students come in. We love to see how you do with something over a longer haul. Anybody can have 2 or 3 good meetings and put on a smile and sound good in person, or over a Zoom call. But it's like the actual work of of running something is really, really hard. And so when we know founders and we've seen the ups and downs they've gone through, we've seen them jump through some hurdles, that gives us a lot more conviction when we're writing that 250K check into a company. Now, there's sort of certain milestones we need to see before we're going to be comfortable going into a diligence process. So pre-diligence, it's all relationship building with us. It's getting emails from founders, it's getting on phone calls, it's getting updates, things like this. When a team is ready to explore funding with us, we write a 250K check, typically when someone's raising between 500K and $1 million. It's often their first funding round, and they're using that money to fund the pilots they're going into. So typically I'll be working with a founder and they'll say, hey, we're starting to close in on 2 or 3 pilot contracts. I'd love to start talking to 15, 17 about funding. Is now the right time? That's the right time for us to go through a diligence process. So at that point, we usually have a lot of data points on the teams by that point, but if we don't know the team that well, we'll do handfuls of calls with the team, the whole team. We want to talk to everybody. We'll do customer diligence calls where we'll talk to 2 customers. That's kind of this empathetic piece where we'll get to learn about what the problem is like for them, what they need. Those are super helpful to us, just because it's so clear how dire something is for the customer. Then we go through a checklist we have of all these different sort of attributes we're looking for within the business, within the founders, and so on. Sometimes we'll do cold references, in the background and write to people that we know on LinkedIn or call up people, hey, have you worked with this person, and so on. But generally from the first meeting we have with someone where they're starting to think, I think I'm ready to raise money, the first phone call is sort of casual and, we'll do a catch up. I have a profiler that I'll have a company fill out if it's appropriate for us to move a little bit more forward. They'll fill out that profiler. I'll take it to my team and say, hey, do we have time to diligence this? What do we want to do here? 15, 17 works very collaboratively. No one of us has authority to write a check over another. I like to think of ourselves as a multi-headed hydra, and that, multiple heads is better than one. If we do decide to go forward into diligence, we'll do a team call. Myself and Michael will get on a call with founders. Sometimes Nick and Zach will join us as well. And then from there, we might do customer diligence calls where we want to find out more and go from there. So the process from that first casual phone call to check is a month at most. We try to keep it really quick. And we also try to give really clear yeses and nos and lots of specific feedback on what we need to see. So for example, with the Hamama team that you all saw earlier, they came to me really early when I first was thinking about becoming a customer, actually. And they said, hey, we're raising a pre-seed round. I really like them a lot, but we don't do a lot in consumer. It's just not an expertise we have. What I like to always say is that Michael and I are not cool people, so we don't know what other people are going to think is cool. But a year later, Camille, the CEO and co-founder, came to me and she said, we're raising our seed round. I'd love to show you my deck so I can get some feedback. And as a past educator, that's like, I love that. I love giving unsolicited advice to people. It's like one of my favorite things. But she came in and she showed me her deck and her materials, and they were stunning. I mean, she had just done such a great job with everything. And I talked to her about what she thought the round might look like and what the economics of the round might look like. And it was a little bit outside of our sweet spot, but not too far. And I went back to Michael and I said, Michael, I think we need to look at this. Like, they have really kicked it out of the park. And if we're going to try early stage consumer D2C play, I think this would be a good one. And so we evaluated it further. And then we wrote a 250K check into the company. And we've done some follow on since then as well. And so that's some of what the process looks like.
And so even though you don't necessarily cover the entire round, if somebody raises $1 million, you put in 250, you do still, or you can, not necessarily, but you can lead the round.
We often lead the round. Oftentimes at pre-seed, like the concept of leading is a little bit more malleable. At a Series A, your lead is committing at least 80% of the round. At the pre-seed, it might be 25%, it might be 50%, somewhere in there is typical. In general, investors love when someone else says, hey, I did a bunch of homework. They really enjoy that. And we are not
in that sense, leading is a responsibility. it's a lot of effort.
Yep.
And depending on the arrangements, and once again at pre-seed, this is very flexible.
Yep.
But sitting on a board becomes something that is a leading indicator of the necessity for the fund to grow, because very simply you cannot humanly or humanly sit on more than, I don't know, 12 or 18 boards. You just go crazy, right? So that is when funds say, oh, we need to add additional general partners. The general partners will want to participate in the
Aquarius fund, and
and that is what leads to additional growth as well, whether one wants it or not.
Yeah, I was going to chime in a little bit. So on the there are a couple things that you brought up. One is that for us at 1517, we do our diligence process whether or not we lead. We lead, I would say 80 or 90% of the time. But if someone else leads, I don't even ask actually for their memo. We always do our own homework. We think that investing
and the memo is the investment memorandum, the internal report that documents the decision process that you do. And as you said, anybody can say no, but everybody must say yes.
Yep. That's how we do it. But for us, like, even if we're not leading, we always do our customer diligence. We always do our homework. That's just part of our process. And then for us at the pre-seed level, like, our take is that it's kind of inappropriate to ask for board seats. So what we do, I think the reason people ask for board seats is because they're afraid that they won't be able to get information, or they need a structured way to get it. Having been a teacher and an educator, I know how to structure things. So we do a mock board meeting with our companies every other month for at least the first year, sometimes the first 2 years. And then we start sort of tapering it down as the company develops and has a board at Series A and beyond. But that's how we get information. It's very helpful to us, because sometimes we'll say to a company, hey, you're doing so great right now. I know you don't have a round open, but how would another 100K help you out? And the founders will be like, oh, wow, this is really great. And so we'll preemptively come in, help them out so they can get more hires and do things. And I've talked to so many investors, angels and pre-seed folks who say, oh, I'm not getting an update from these founders and I'm not getting this. And it is on the founders to be structured and do that. But I always tell people, like, we have something on the calendar that's preset. The moment we make the investment, we have an onboard welcome meeting. They get the calendar invite that is essentially into the rest of their life until we stop working with them. And we have it all set up so that we get that information. But my purview about board seats is that it's really not appropriate until the Series A, because when someone's investing, 80% of capital into a round, I think that makes sense for them to have a board seat. But before that, when it's kind of piecemeal, I just think it's too risky to give up control of your company to people that honestly you don't have that deep of a relationship with yet.
The way you structure the investment at the seed or pre-seed is universally through either a convertible loan or through a SAFE, which is an even lighter touch legal contract. And once again, for those who are watching this, that means that you don't receive equity in the company right away. What you receive is an agreement, so that the money you are handing over is going to be converting into equity in a future point in time. And even though technically the loan could be repaid, you would feel almost offended if the loan was repaid, because you would feel that you are being excluded from some.
Absolutely, you'd be edged out. Oh, that'd be
That's right.
Hard thinking about it. I'm like, oh, that'd be terrible.
And it is amazing, especially outside of hotspots like the Valley and New York, how many budding entrepreneurs are stuck at very basic questions like, okay, the investor is going to give me money, but do I have to give it back? And what if I don't make it? I am stuck with, because they are maybe the only the serious financial transaction they did at the time was to take out a student loan, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And that is so bad that
Yeah.
you cannot even bankrupt it away on a personal level, right?
Yeah.
So these convertible loans or safes
Yep.
are your instrument, and then when the first priced round comes,
Yep.
typically the Series A, that is when you can calculate what percentage of the company you end up with.
That's exactly.
And another advantage of the convertible is that it doesn't force the two parties, the entrepreneur and the investor, to pretend that they can value the company at that early stage, when it can only be bad for one or both.
Right.
But that it is right, it is literally impossible.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. And these structures really help to set things up in the early days, because you don't know exactly where something should be set. But you do want to be able to capture equity in the company during that price round later. We've written a bunch about all these different topics, and we also have podcasts that we've put out. And so it is very confusing. And I'd urge all entrepreneurs to educate themselves as much as they can on these vehicles. And also even things like how much is appropriate to sell off of your company. You know, I had a young person come to my table once at a hackathon and said, well, you know, how much equity are you looking for in a company? And he sort of had this like defensive swagger. And I said, oh, you know, we write a $250K check and we're looking for, I don't know, 5 to 7% of a company. And his jaw dropped open. And I looked at him and I said, is that a good jaw drop or a bad jaw drop? And he says, I can't believe it. I talked to an angel investor here and they wanted 50% of my company for 50K. And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It is unfortunate that the ecosystem includes predators who basically screw entrepreneurs over. I always tell people they should aim to be able to structure the growth of their company so that over the course of 3-4 rounds, including the seed or pre-seed, they still keep control in terms of having the majority of the shares and the majority of the board. And anytime they meet somebody who aims to wrestle that away from them, it's paradoxical, and it should be really questioned, very, very aggressively questioned, because it is a confirmation of lack of belief in the entrepreneur. But you, Danielle, and I, and so many of us, we don't invest on somebody who builds, you know, I mean, not the builds. We don't invest in keyboards. We invest in people who know how to build or dream keyboards or whatever else, right? And investing in those people means that you have to believe in them. And if you say, oh yeah, I believe in you as long as I make all the decisions, what are you talking about?
Oh, we always, and I've been saying this to founders lately. I said, you know, we believe that if we think we need to drive your car, then we should never have made the investment. Like, the founders are in the front seats. They're the ones driving the vehicle. And if we think we have to grab the wheel from them, we should have never made the investment. I was telling a founder earlier this morning, I said, we're kind of the goofballs in the back handing up the Cheetos. Like, we're here to help you out. We're here to connect you with other founders. You know, we're here to have those hard conversations about things. But if I think I need to operate what you're doing, that's just not the model that we work under. I mean, there are people who work under that model and seem to be successful with it, but for us, we just don't think that's the right way to invest. And then there are other things that happen too with investors where it's not even out of malice, but it's out of just not seeing enough deals and not knowing. So sometimes what we'll see is that an angel will come in and they'll actually take too small a percent of a company. They'll set something like a 10 million cap on a company that's really new. And the founder will come to us and say, oh, we have terms on the round, it's 10 million. And I'm like, oh, it's not 10 million. Like, because it's what, you know, the way to think about this is what they might be saying is just outside of what's normal for market rates. And so one of the things that we always need to do with our founders is I tell them, you're the expert on your company and your technology and what you're doing. And my job is to have expertise in what's happening in the market of startups, so that if you say something, I can tell you, hey, you are way outside the ballpark of what's normal right now. Like, for a pre-seed round right now, we're seeing anything between like maybe a 2 and 5 million cap on something. So when someone says, oh, we're going to do a 10, but they're at the same stage as those other pre-seed founders, we always have to tell them, like, no, sorry, that's not how this works. Like, we got to back.
And let me tell you, compared to the rest of the world,
yeah,
you see crazy stuff in the Valley all the time, including in valuations, whether it is ending up as Juicero or I love the arrogance of VCs who pretend they know, except it is all survivorship bias.
Oh, right. Oh, it's
and then look at the list of investors in something like Juicero.
Yeah.
And not gloating about it or not even telling them, but just deep inside knowing that it is so not true so many times. And then of course they make it up on the volume. That is also true. Yeah. But a lot of it really is a lot of sweat, but still based on factors that are very, very hard to
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's a lot going on.
So Daniel, your path is really wonderful and inspiring, and also it really transpires that you are having a lot of fun in doing what you're doing. You love working with founders, and definitely with your firm, anybody receiving an investment is receiving much more than money. That is one of the mantras of VC. Oh, we are adding value, and so many times that is not true. Right. But definitely with you, it is. So in case somebody watching this video believes that they have an idea, a project, a product, a service that could be a good fit,
sure.
What should they do?
Yeah, I would say, and I'll broaden it even more. I'll say, if the person is a young maker, student, they could be a high school student, even college student, they could be someone who's already dropped out. One, they can go to our form on our website. We answer, I would say, 90% of these and have at least a phone call with everyone who comes through. We believe in the magic of serendipity, and that, just because you don't have access to people in our network doesn't mean you shouldn't be part of it. So you can contact us there. You could email me personally at Danielle@1517fund.com as well. I've made some really wonderful connections lately through Twitter as well. So I've really enjoyed being on there. I've been posting. I use Twitter as my vent machine. So I just vent about random things on there. People seem to enjoy it. But yeah, please reach out. Accessibility is one of the things that we really value. It's one of our sort of mottos in the fund, is to be accessible to people. So please reach out. And even if you think, oh, I shouldn't, my thing isn't ready yet, just send a note over the transom. It's okay.
And it is really refreshing to hear that and to feel that, because the common perception of the world of investment is that it is detached, it is arrogant, it is self distancing, or lives in a bubble, but the contrary is so true. Luckily, with you and with others as well, because making ourselves accessible and available has been a great benefit, both to the entrepreneurs, but also to us. It has been great.
And I think early stage investors understand that it's about that personal relationship. So I love the people at Village Global and Hustle Fund and 2048 and Precursor and Unshackled and all these different groups. Like, I think when you're working at the earliest stages, it really is about the people. So all the investors I've met who work at that stage, they're my like tribal investors. I'm like, oh, those are people I would want to hang out with you. But yeah, there are a lot of big personalities in this world, and there's plenty of it that I'm fine to leave by the sidelines.
So Danielle, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Congratulations in your path and your endeavors, and good luck with California. Hopefully, being able to open up with moderation and with very rational and scientific approaches, rather than driven by pure wonderful emotions, but which in this case would be counterproductive for sure.
Yep.
So resist and thrive.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. What a pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you. So thank you everybody for following Searching for the Question live. If you would like to suggest people that you would like to see on the show, you can go to davidorban.com/sftql/guest vote. And since now we also have the sftq.live website, I realize that I have to set up the corresponding page over there as well, so that you can suggest and vote on people that others suggested. Join our Discord channel. If you speak Italian, I also have an Italian YouTube channel, and you are welcome to subscribe there as well. And of course, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/David Orban, and see you next time with Searching for the Question live.